My name is Kurt J. Mungle, and on this channel, Theories of Everything, I analyze said theories of everything from a mathematical physics perspective, which is my background, but as well as investigating other grand philosophical theories, such as those relating to consciousness, reality, etc. Today's episode is a bit different, as I wanted to show myself how moderately straightforward it is to generate a theory of everything and have it solve all known problems, or the majority of them, especially when it doesn't have math, and to make it considerably convincing to those who don't have a formal background in these subjects, and even for some that do, but I'll get to that point later. So what you're about to witness is the end result of me typing for pretty much 30 minutes straight or so, nonstop, and as a test again, so that I could send my academic philosopher friends, my academic physicist friends, and non-academic friends as well, and then see if they could tell that this theory I constructed, which I'm about to read, is entirely BS, using highfalutin terms to give it some air of credibility and obscurity, though I'll tell you the results again toward the end. There are also some announcements about this channel later. And my theory, by the way, is called the superconscious hierarchical layered ontological neutrino generation theory, or in other words, SHLONG. Now for my toe. Here we go. I'm going to make a theory that isn't materialism first, nor is it consciousness first. Rather, there's another force. And yes, it's a force. It's called the meta-consciousness force. Meta-consciousness is more primary than consciousness. How? It looks at itself. And by looking at itself in its meta-conscious way, it performs a calculation. Now, this calculation, which it does inexorably and inherently, is responsible for the expansion of space. Why? Because in order for there to be information created, we already have an entropic limit to how much information can be contained in a certain region of space that's called the Bekenstein bound. Thus, space must expand to compensate for the information being created by metaconsciousness. This metaconsciousness is responsible for both materialism and for consciousness. It solves the mind-body problem because it's not that one is more primary than the other. Rather, there's something else that creates both of them simultaneously, and that's why they're correlated with each other. In the same way that when you walk, you have two footprints. They're correlated with one another. It's not that you have the same foot. It's that you have two different feet, left and a right one. In fact, it's in this way that we have chirality. It explains chirality in nature. Why is there a left-handed and a right-handed neutrino? It's because the right-handed neutrino is the one that metaconsciousness uses to create material. The conscious neutrino is the left-handed neutrino. That's why we can interact with it, because we are also conscious. Whereas the right-handed neutrino is pure material. We are not pure material. We're made of consciousness. But there does exist material. However, it's not what the materialists think. Nor is it what the consciousness people think. Material doesn't come from consciousness, and further, material is not what we probe with consciousness. We can only probe consciousness with consciousness. So there is a material, and the right-handed neutrino is that. But the right-handed neutrino interacts with the fourth force. This fourth force is already an interaction. So you can interact with an interaction. Material and consciousness interact as consciousness. We can't see that. However, what we can see is the interaction between the interaction of material with the interaction of material and consciousness. In other words, this is what a two category would be. It's not a morphism, it's a morphism between morphisms. We interact with these two morphisms, but not with a one morphism. It's in this way that we've also solved the problem of what happens at a singularity. The singularity is a mathematical artifact of trying to interact directly with materialism, when what we should be doing is interacting not with the objects of the material world, again, which is separate from us, but rather we can only interact with the interaction. At that level, there is no singularity. It also explains the arrow of time, because the arrow of time is invisible to us for the same reason. It's not a morphism from A to B. It's a directed morphism, yes, okay, but from one morphism to another. The metaconsciousness is what people probe when they take psychedelics. You wonder, why do they work? Well, it's because our experience is one of consciousness at a derived level, and the base level is metaconsciousness. However, we can puncture the floor to have little bits of light shine from below. The psychedelics do both. So they reveal truth, but they also damage us. And it's in this way that Plato's cave allegory is correct, and the Icarus allegory, and what Lovecraft intimated. This theory is also resolving the liar's paradox, because the sentence itself isn't false or true, it's meta-true. We can't access meta-true without meditation, and that's why the word meditation is pronounced meditation. And because we can't access this meta-truth, we call it a paradox. Also, look, we have electricity, we have magnetism, gravity, so on. Why? Why is gravity weak? It's because what gravity is the already punctured floor, which is just minutely punctured with pinholes. So we wonder, why is gravity different than all the other forces? Is it different? Yes, it is different. It's of a completely different nature. Electromagnetism is the material, and that's strong because it's everywhere. When you have a small pinhole in the floor of this reality, you become attracted to it. Why? Because we're innately attracted to truth. However, because we're sinful and we're not perfect, we're actually all equally sinful. So this explains original sin. It's correct. If we were more pure, we would actually be attracted to gravity more. We don't realize how alike we are in the sense that we're all equally sinful. So the statement of the equivalence principle is actually more a statement about morality. It's just that we're so blind by our materialism to see it. The ether is the material that binds the material world together, and that's why we can't see it. Also, many people think that the electromagnetic field is what produces consciousness, but rather it's that metaconsciousness produces consciousness and the electromagnetic field is all around, but so is consciousness. Thus, we greatly associate those two, but it's a mistake. The electromagnetic field is only correlated with consciousness. So this explains the bioelectric field theory of Michael Levin and the semi-field theory of John Joe McFadden. Idealism is false. Materialism is false. It's not a dichotomy. Rather, it's a trichotomy. And that's what the Christians had their finger on, but they didn't have the vocabulary. Their Trinity was about this exact topic. Plato's forms, by the way, are about the material world. He had it inverted, but Plato was so close. This world isn't a pale imitation of the non-physical. The material world is a pale imitation of the metaconsciousness world, and this world is the world of forms, in the sense that it's the consciousness world. It's a triality, and this triality is also related to the three generations of matter. Why are particles coming in left and right-handed? Because the conscious and the material world have the same common origin. Why is there three generations of matter? Because it's a reflection of the three realms. The universe has been giving us a hint all along. It's in this way that Penrose is most correct, but even he is deluded by his math and thinks that quantum gravity has something to do with consciousness. But it's more like quantum gravity is the interaction which we can't observe. We can only see the interaction of the interaction. This also explains UFOs. Because what UFOs are is not something anomalous occurring at the conscious level, but rather it's entities who have mastered the metaconsciousness level. It appears anomalous to us because from the conscious level to the metaconsciousness level, it can only appear anomalous. We can't grok it. We then make the foolish mistake of thinking that the UFOs are trying to communicate with us, but actually, what they're doing is technologically moving to the material world, not to the consciousness world. Recall that the consciousness world and the material world are hand in hand, though they're not the same. So we get peeks and pokes from both sides. The material side, which is what people mean when they say nuts and bolts, and simultaneously from the metaconsciousness side, which is what they mean when they talk about high strangeness or the phenomenon. They're of the same origin, but exist in different ontological realms. Anti-gravity in the material realm is not the same as anti-gravity here. Remember, it's backward. Or in other words, it's reflected, left exchanged with right. So we feel the aliens are being quote-unquote evil because that's what anti-gravity is. It's the removing of yourself from the light. Remember, gravity is our innate compulsion to the good, to the light, to truth. In their world, it doesn't look like that, but that's the effect evil has in our world. The Vedics would call the conscious world the one of existence, but there's also something called subsistence, which is what the Buddhists touched on in their concept of something neither existing nor not existing, called katsuskoti. The metaconsciousness is the subsistence, and the material is not existence. There's actually something else called supersistence. That's a cloud-like structure, which is also called the Atman or the Brahman by some cultures. What it does is it rains down droplets, which are individualized souls from a larger supersistent one. They become attracted by the same mechanism of gravity in the conscious realm, but they're repelled from the material realm because, again, gravity over there works backward, which is what we're describing when we talk about white holes. So this cloud serves as the nervous system and gives rise to the galactic tendrils that we see in outer space, which is actually not outer space. It's paraspace because we're asymptotic to it. So the brain of the Brahmin is the same as the schlong of the Trinity. God is not the cloud. God is not the same as Atman or Brahmin. Now, this distinction resolves the tension between different religions because they use the same word, God. However, to the Westerners, God refers to the metaconsciousness realm, so for the Abrahamics. And recall, the rest of this world is separate from it, although connected to it. Prayer opens you up to it. So to the atheists who say that they don't believe in God, they do. Their God is the material world. A physicalist is one who puts their faith in material and not in metaconsciousness, or Atman, or consciousness. Faith dances through the universe like the ether, an ethereal glue binding the subconscious threads of existence. When you make a transfer from consciousness to Atman, that's what we call ontology. Now, when you make a transfer from material or morphism, from material to the meta, that's what we call epistemology. And when you go from meta consciousness to regular consciousness, that's what we call axiology. So Zeno's paradox is solved because in metaconsciousness to consciousness, that's where you get values. And Zeno's paradox is not one of epistemology, but one of an ethical framework of infinite division. Don't you see? My theory solves everything. It solves the Big Bang, the arrow of time, the expansion of space, the hard problem of consciousness, Michael Evans' work, Penrose's work, UFOs, Plato's, Christianity, idealism. It unifies infinity categories and thus unifies Wolfram's Rulliad approach. It unifies Wittgenstein with Quine because there is only a private language. He was wrong, diametrically wrong. There's not a public one. Quine was right. Don't you see? Let me come on your show, Rogan. Why aren't scientists listening to me? I challenge you to prove me wrong. The people deserve to see my schlong. Okay, so I wrote pretty much all of that in 30 minutes or so. And again, I challenged myself to not think about anything prior. I also should say that even though I knew full well I was making up complete BS, At some point, I used the washroom as a break in between writing. And during this urination break, I remember thinking, wait a minute, what if this is how the world works? So, okay, imagine if what you do is you go about writing like this either on your own, or maybe you do a trip or go into a trance and you convince yourself of something over and over. And if you were to recapitulate it to people who unfailingly concur with you for whatever reason, maybe you have more status than them, or you're citing terminology that's above their pay grade, so they just believe whatever you're saying must be true. Well, that's a fascinating recipe. I sent this to a few people, some researchers in physics and philosophy, an AI guy, and many people who just aren't in the field of science at all. And of course, I didn't include the acronym because that gives it away. The philosophers understood it was a joke. The AI guy did as well. Most of the physicists and then the non-STEM people understood it as a joke. One person said that the opening parts sounded like the CTMU. Now, it's difficult to not sound like Chris Langan when you're using the word meta and describing reality. There's only two people, Chris Langan and Mark Zuckerberg, who would do that. So, point taken. But a few people thought I was deeply onto something. And then I told them, hey, it's BS, by the way. And then they said, almost all said something which is similar. They said, perhaps your intuition is on the right track, something like that. That what guided you through your stream of consciousness is correct. Now, what they didn't know, I thought of this critique prior, and so what I did was use the random number generator to make different decisions in the storyline or the theory. There were also times where I wrote down something in stream of consciousness, reread it, then said, you know what, let's just do the opposite of what I previously stated, simply to muck about with the structure. Now, this is why criticism is so harsh but beautiful at the same time. It's not because critics are correct. It's because the social factor of having to throw out your idea and having teams of people excoriate you. You have to be humbled. You have to get some pushback and take your lumps, hopefully improve. You actually need this criticism. You can't be surrounded by people who will just say, whoa, man, that's like a great idea. You become detached. And if you're tenured, you can even build a community that becomes detached. The hard-nosed questioner has their place, like the rock tumbler does, to breed these beautiful gems coming from unrefined, sabulous rock. There's something truthful in society. It's quite a pathological phrase we say that a society is sick and only I hold the truth. It's, at least for me, I find it more fruitful to think I'm sick. And it's not society that necessarily holds the truth, but contending with society, and the communication breeds truth. By the way, imagine how furious I would be if I said all of this and I believed it, and then someone said, okay, yes, but can you reproduce the standard model? I would say, look, I'm giving you all the answers to life's questions, and you're asking me to calculate the mass of a muon? You must be the one who's mad. All right, now some more fun begins. With Theories of Everything, with this channel, I don't intend to just interview people and then people, the audience members, get information passively. I want there to be research that comes from this. So over the next 60 days, I'm going to be doing something called the Rethinking the Foundations Conference. What this is an online series where there'll be 3 streams this year: Rethinking the Foundations of Physics, Rethinking the Foundations of Biology, and Rethinking the Foundations of the Academy. Each one will have a separate question. So this year, the question for physics is, what is unification? For biology, it's what lies beyond Darwin? And for the Academy, it's how can we improve scientific inquiry, or the scientific method. Neil Turok is giving the inaugural lecture for the physics stream, and then for biology and the other streams, more is to be announced. This is just a teaser for now. Each of these is live. However, you have to sign up at kurtjaimungal.org, CURTJAIMUNGAL, to get notified. You just sign up for the email list and I'll give you the unlisted YouTube live link. Later, all of these lectures and then the Q&A/podcast afterward will be released right here on this channel. And well, thank you for allowing me to dangle my schlong.